Trump announces 1776 commission to further patriotic education in the public schools by opposing the 1619 curriculum. 1619 liberals, meanwhile, choke on their own ahistorical bile. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziest impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start with President Trump's new directive to promote patriotic education in American schools, not the Howard Zinn 1619 nonsense trash. And this is really a good thing. This is Donald Trump using his bully pulpit to bully exactly the right people. This crowd of ahistorical social justice engineers who want to eradicate American history, who want to twist it through the one narrow lens. And I get my whole academic career has been spent fighting lenses, right? I mean, the way that the academy, and what you're seeing with this 1619 program is miseducation at the university level, which has become completely normified, spilling out into the broader culture. You can't contain this garbage on campus. 1619 is a completely academic idea in the sense that is academic history that is divorced from reality. And so lenses, for 30 years now in colleges, they've been filtering books through the lenses of Marxism and feminism and environmentalism. And no one said a word about this. These are all left-wing advocacy positions. We are teaching your kids to read not books, not what books say, not what authors have to say in books that they write. We are having kids read books filtered through radically progressive, socially activist, left-wing lenses. This is Donald Trump using his bully pulpit to call out seeing history only through those lenses, and I'm glad he's doing it.
Well, and actually President Trump spoke about this, talked about America's heritage, talked about our history, and said how we are under assault. And it's all the 1619 project. It was a good play on his part, or his staffers, I'm sure, came up with the whole 1776 commission as the official title for it to kind of do the whole play on 1619 project. So he actually spoke to the crowd, and listened to the beginning of the speech.
We are here today to declare that we will never submit to tyranny. We will reclaim our history and our country for citizens of every race, color, religion, and creed.
I see this at the university, as you well know. Every day of my life, I get these letters, I get these hostile kids, oftentimes transgender kids, confused gender kids, sending letters from anonymous Gmail accounts about things like, I just wanted to go to class, and how dare you give voice to other perspectives? How dare you have a contract, Dr. Besta, that guarantees we're going to read books not through politically advocacy lenses, but we're going to read books based on what the books have to say. The way that this infantilizes university students is shocking. And now that this has spilled off into the broader campus, it is really a very good thing. What Donald Trump says, we're not going to surrender to you. You're not going to turn American history, which is largely progressive, you progressive idiots. It largely is already progressive. We went through a whole bunch of bad periods, and they've gotten better. The fact that it's not your little left-wing gender-free utopia is irrespective of the fact that American history, its trajectory, is progressive in a good sense. Progressive in the sense, more freedom, more liberty, more opportunity. And Donald Trump is a staunch defender of these things, one of the few we've had as a president in quite a long time.
And the thing is, the 1776 commission compared to the 1619 project, if you just looked at it from those two eras, 1776 is a much more optimistic tone, because even though what you can say now about we aren't a perfect nation and we haven't lived up to the ideals that we put into our Declaration and into our Constitution, we have a high starting ground, that we have something to reach and achieve for. Whereas if you start with the 1619 project, you just assume that everything always has been horrible and everyone sucks.
Well, it's worse than that. You go back to 1619, there is no country, there are no founding documents, there is no founding ideal. The Mayflower hasn't gotten here yet, so there's absolutely nothing. Right? The idea that you're going to go back to 1619, and that's cutesy, right? The year before the Plymouth plantation, the year before the Mayflower sales, right? And so you're trying to to imagine a world pre-American influence, which is itself nonsense. I mean, the entire 16th century is a world of European influence in the Western Hemisphere. 1492 is a good deal before 1619. So the cutesiness of this, but by all means, start in 1619 when you have no American documents that you can blame, where there are no American people you can blame, where there is no American slave trade that you can blame. Blame it all on the Europeans, I suppose, if you must. But it is incoherent. And I've said this many times before. We'll check out Donald Trump's other clip, which is a long, meaningful clip in a second here. But I've said this before. All right, but let's do the same thing for Native American culture, right? Let's stop pretending that the glories of Native American culture were stamped out in 1619. How about the inglorious way the Aztec treated other Native Americans? How about the countless tribes that held slaves, waged war, raped tribal women from conquest? These things happen, whether you like it or not. Let's go back as far as we have to talk about this globally, not just limit it, as the progressives want to do, to the undermaking of America. Donald Trump, you say it first.
Our children are instructed from propaganda tracks like those of Howard Zinn that try to make students ashamed of their own history. The left has warped, distorted, and defiled the American story with deceptions, falsehoods, and lies. There is no better example than the New York Times totally discredited 1619 Project. This project rewrites American history to teach our children that we were founded on the principle of oppression, not freedom.
And I'm happy that President Trump actually called out, name-dropped Howard Zinn in his garbage heap of a history of the United States that is being taught not only in our college classrooms in all subjects, whether it be history class or education classes like I got it in, English class. They're putting that book everywhere they possibly can because they want to teach you that we're a horrible, no good nation. And that's what the 1619 Project does as well. But now President Trump name drops and actually calls it out for what it is.
And you look at our last few presidents. I don't care if they're Democrats or Republican. Empty suits like George W. Bush. Complete academic frauds like Barack Obama. Complete academic frauds. This guy supposedly was this constitutional lawyer at Harvard University. He's all about the founding of the country. Obama would never give a speech like this. Obama, first thing he did was go over to Egypt and first job as president and apologize for 2,000 years of Western culture. Donald Trump is willing to defend Western culture. He is willing to defend American culture. And now he stands up and defends American history. Look, it's not jingoism. It's not nationalism. It's not raging racism. The reason people come to our country from all these other more morally better countries that the left likes is because we have more freedom and opportunity. The fact that we have more freedom and opportunity means that our cultural collective history ultimately turned out much better than those countries when they're running away from them. You would think that would be kind of an obvious historical observation, but it's not.
So as we know, on college campuses, everything is about white supremacy and slavery, and it's white supremacy is the one who perpetuates the slavery over and over. And so, of course, in a quiz that was given at Vanderbilt University, there was a post-lecture quiz, okay? And Young America's Foundation got a screenshot of a student who sent in the results of a question. And it was from a poli-sci class. And the quiz asked, was the Constitution designed to perpetuate white supremacy and protect the institution of slavery? True or false? And as you can see on the screen, the correct answer is supposed to be true. But the kid got it wrong. Poor child. And now what's so interesting, I guess, or more interesting, because this is on probably every quiz across the nation, is this specific political science class boasts about having 800 students and being the largest class that Vanderbilt has ever taught. So right there, with just one post-lecture quiz, 800 students, well, if they took the quiz, 800 students get to hear that.
What is so maddening about this? This is a history class, a political science class, basically. It's a history class. And they're taking questions that are ultimately debatable, right? questions that require nuance and historical background that you could have
Yes.
you could have serious constitutional minds arguing this pro and con.
And they have.
Right.
And they continue to.
And Vanderbilt reduces it to true and false.
True, false.
Right. And of course, there's only one answer. This is the kind of bias. Mom and Dad, this is mostly what your kids are going to face. There are going to be times when your kids show up on campus and you have some spectacularly left-wing liberal loon standing in front of kids ranting and raving about America. We're going to have a bunch of them on the show this week. Does that happen? It happens. But much more likely to happen is this. The general fundamental governing assumptions about everything your kids are going to do on campus are going to be progressive. So something as simple as this, right? The kid who knows it's false, that's a simplistic false statement, didn't get the points. He'll know what to answer next time, right?
Since you mentioned the points. Now, a Vanderbilt spokesman did email Young America's Foundation when a comment was sought and said, you just got to listen to the whole paragraph. Consistent with our commitment to the principles of free speech and academic freedom, Vanderbilt has long fostered an environment in which diverse ideas and opinions can be expressed in our efforts to both model and teach the principles of civil discourse. The question was posed to stimulate discussion. True, false question, by the way. Students were in fact not rewarded or penalized for their answers. It's a quiz at the end, so I'm guessing they had points awarded or taken away. It is unfortunate that the intent behind and purpose of the academic exercise have been misconstrued. We appreciate that our students, faculty, and staff have historically engaged in respectful dialogue, and we hope this continues.
It wasn't misconstrued because you labeled it false. If you let the kids pick true and false get rid of true and false. Do you choose A or B? How about that? Which of the two answers do you choose, A or B? And stop telling anybody there's wrong. You created that assignment with somebody wrong and somebody right. You were the ones, your teacher was the one who attached true and false to the two answers. Again, if you had just done A and B and then let them discuss it, you would be right. But rather than come out and point to that, you hide behind your little justifications. And I just got one question. I know you got a comment to make. I want you to make it. My final comment on this story is this. How in this day and age, how is a university still allowed to be named after a huge robber baron? How is that even possible?
That's a good question. But maybe that question wasn't quite like this one, because this question was posed to stimulate discussion. You can't have discussion in a lecture pit of 800
No, you can't.
when you're doing a post-lecture quiz outside of the classroom and your only option is true or false. You don't even leave it as an open-ended question, and you won't, because it's 800 students and no professor or the TAs are going to deal with all the answers for that. So you're going the easy route.
Well, but that's
automatic grading, and it doesn't matter what the answers
matter.
are, because they don't care. So I just encourage everyone to please read the records of the Federal Convention of 1787, volumes 1 and 2. I have them. I will have a discussion with you about them. This actually details exactly what happened at the Constitutional Convention, and you can learn a lot more about what the boys thought about the slavery that happened.
Katie, was that written by white men?
Yes.
Then you cannot
James
ask.
Madison took his notes.
Then you cannot ask
He's a little
young
guy.
college students
No.
to read those books. Don't you understand the toxic environment you are creating?
I
In
don't
order
care.
to answer a question about American history, you are sending impressionable 21-year-old children. You're sending them to the perverse, racist
Yes.
white minds that conceived this horrible republic, right?
All aboard.
I go back to what I
Come
said
down
before.
my way.
False, right? If you're labeling it false, you're not going to have a fair discussion. If you're telling everybody who clicked the second box, by definition that's false, then that, even if you were able, as Katie pointed out, to have any kind of a discussion, you can't in an 800-room lecture section. You have chilled it, right? That's like saying 2 + 2 is 4, and no, the answer is 5. Right? And you're going to have a huge discussion, but the weight of the institution is already authoritatively on 5. It makes it a lot harder to do so.
So we know our students don't know anything about the Constitution. They don't know much about their history other than we're an oppressive people and they are oppressed all the time. But we found out just how ignorant they are about international history as well, and dealing with the Holocaust. Some don't even know what the heck the Holocaust was. A new survey actually shows that it was commissioned by the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, the Claims Conference, and you can look at all their results on their website. But basically, they found out that the millennials and Generation Z, so it's 18-year-olds all the way up to 39-year-olds, 63% of the respondents did not know that 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. 63% had like, I don't know. And more than 1 in 3, 36%, thought that 2 million or fewer had been killed. They had no idea the gravity of the whole thing, because in our history classes, we don't talk about it as much. We don't focus on anything other than, the progressive narrative. So.
And this is the consequence of allowing things like the 1619 curriculum to go forward. This is what you get for 20 years, 30 years of using Howard Zinn in the classroom, as Donald Trump pointed out. What you've got here is this is the tragedy of this, people. You see this right here. I guarantee you, if you do nothing about the 1619 curriculum, keeping it out, it's not an academic curriculum to begin with. The woman who came up with this works for the New York Times. She's not a historian. She's not a history professor. You have all sorts of liberal American history professors who say that this is garbage. And so if now we're in a situation now, I would argue that is probably one of the top 5 things that every American kid should know. I'm serious. The idea that 6 million Jews were systemically eliminated by the Nazis is one thing that is in the top 5 things that every American citizen, young, old, or at any point in their schooling, they should know. And now you've got well over 50%, well over 60% who don't know. That's the consequence of teaching ahistorical history and politicized history. We're teaching kids, we're magnifying for kids the number of slaves. Every year we hear the number of slaves, it keeps going up, right? It's 100 million slaves now, some people have even postulated. We're radically overstating the number of Africans who were brought here as slaves to make a political point. And now we are destroying the actual historical narrative about the Jews. Our kids don't even, it's way lower, or they don't know anything at all. Well, that's what comes from this politicized curriculum.
That's the thing. And they asked the question, how many of you have even heard of the Holocaust? And 12%, that's 1 in 8. 1 in 8 of the students had never even heard about the Holocaust. And those who did hear about it, 23% of them said it was either a myth, it had been exaggerated, or they just weren't sure.
Because
it's almost 1 in 4, 23%.
This doesn't even, is this anti-Semitism? Of course it is. There's been a long-standing history. If you're making the case for African-American culture, somehow a long time ago, that got deeply embedded with the anti-Jewish cause. Think about Farrakhan. Think about the Nation of Islam. The irrational scapegoating and targeting of Jews. That comes par for the course with this. But it's even more going on with your university professors and your high school and middle school teachers, right? In order to make black suffering seem so much greater, and the only suffering that this country really needs to focus on now, we're going to trivialize what happened to the Jews, because nothing that happened to American slaves in this country parallels what happened to the Jews. You can pretend that they're equal Holocaust, but they're not even close. And it is. Back before we became a Black Lives Matter addled nation 10, 12 years ago, people would have recognized from all walks of life, including liberal ones, that to make a direct correlation between the Holocaust and slavery was inappropriate, if not downright wrong.
Well, and we talk all the time about, empathy. And that's Joe Biden's whole platform, is he's empathetic, and we should understand everyone else's, lives and feelings and all that. And they found that 48% of these people could not name a single concentration camp or a ghetto that was established in World War II. And if you want to talk about empathy, go visit one of these, the ghettos or the concentration camps. I guarantee you, firsthand experience, you will leave a different person in understanding and being more empathetic.
Does Joe Biden have empathy confused with gropiness?
We don't know. But
is that it's possible. Is that what that is?
And when they broke down the data by the states, because they broke the data down by the states, for example, 60% of Texans couldn't name a single concentration camp. But the good states, I guess, when they met the 3 criteria, which were that whether the young people have definitely heard about the Holocaust, whether they can name one concentration camp, death camp, or ghetto, and whether they knew that 6 million Jews were killed. The best state, kind of a shock to me, was Wisconsin at 42%.
Really?
Yeah. Minnesota followed with 37, Massachusetts at 35, and the bottom of the barrel, those who are the worst states in the whole nation for understanding anything, is Florida, 20%, Mississippi, 18%, and Arkansas, 17%, who used to have a governor who became a president. But there may be a correlation
also,
there.
A lot
maybe
of that,
not.
if you look at the numbers, too, Mississippi and Arkansas are routinely at the bottom of education, and Mississippi, too. They're almost always at the bottom. So some of this has to do with just bad teaching and bad systemic schools overall. But it is interesting, Wisconsin and Minnesota, Why isn't it that a state like New York
Should be.
or a state like Florida, where New York Jews go to retire, you would think those two states with huge proportions of Jewish people would know. But what does it tell you about liberal progressive states like New York, where home to more Jews than even there are Jews in Israel? What does it tell you that in New York kids aren't learning this stuff? De Blasio, Cuomo, what do you have to say about yourself?
It's time for some real education. The Great Wave off Kanagawa, also known as the Great Wave, or simply The Wave, is a woodblock print by Japanese artist Katsushika Hakusai, published between 1829 and 1833 during Japan's late Edo period. It's the first print in Hakusai's series, 36 Views of Mount Fuji, and is often considered the most recognizable work of Japanese art in the world.
Yeah, take a look at the picture real quick. It really is quite beautiful. I mean, this painting, this print, I should say, it's got such a beautiful flow for it, doesn't it? I mean, it's the kind of thing that somebody like me who gets routinely seasick, if I just focus my eyes a little bit carefully, I get a little nauseated, right? You can just see, and what is it that's the only thing in this entire picture that is actually anchoring anything? See Mount Fuji in the back? All these types of prints, right, were ultimately surrounding Mount Fuji, which was a holy mountain to the Japanese and a liminal one. This image depicts an enormous wave threatening 3 boats off the coast in the Sagami Bay. This is also the Kanagawa Prefecture. While Mount Fuji rises in the background, sometimes assumed to be a tsunami, the wave is more likely to be a large rogue wave. As with other prints in the series, it depicts the area and activities around Mount Fuji under varying conditions. Throughout the series are dramatic uses of that wonderful Berlin blue pigment, it's called. Hokusai began painting when he was only 6 years old. At the age of 12, his father sent him to work at a bookseller's. At 16, he was apprenticed as an engraver and spent 3 years learning the trade. At the same time, he began to produce his own illustrations. At 18, he was accepted as an apprentice to the Katsukawa Shunosho, one of the foremost ukiyo-e artists of the time. Now, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. UKIYO-E, ukiyo-e artists of the time. And that's the kind of image you're seeing here. That whole tradition centers around Mount Fuji. It shows the conditions of how that's the one thing. And you think about the Japanese for a second. Can you imagine living on a relatively small island in the middle of a very tempestuous ocean? It would have to have psychological ramifications, right? I mean, this is the culture that gave us Godzilla, for God's sake, right? Monsters rising out of the deep every couple of years to destroy everything. And a fire-breathing, radioactive dragon that comes from the ocean. It shows you the deep psychological problems of having a beautiful ocean surrounding you all the time, but one, it's in a very dangerous place in terms of tides and tsunamis. Go back to the image. The dark color around Mount Fuji seems to indicate that the scene occurs early in the morning, with the sun rising from behind the observer, illuminating the mountain's snowy peak. While storm clouds can be seen hanging in the sky between the viewer and Mount Fuji, no rain is to be seen in the foreground, right? And so completely cloudless. In the scene, there are 3 oshikuri bune, fast boats that are used to transport live fish from Isu and Boso peninsulas to the market bays of Edo. So you can see those ships in those dangerous longboats right in the middle of that storm. The real genius of this, I think, is twofold. One, it's all about movement, and 2, it's all about the movement that Japan, as a culture, as a place, as a geographical point, represents in terms of stability among all of that chaos.
All right, just as a reminder, these premier beverage vessels of freedom are now available when you join our Patriot Club with a one-time $99 tax-deductible donation. Your gift is literally keeping this show going, as Facebook and YouTube have demonetized our content. So visit patriotclub.us, sign up today. It's at patriotclub.us. Now we're going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day. The Constitution is a mere 4,400 words long, and you can find it literally everywhere. The average person can read about 750 words per every 5 minutes. So it would take you 30 minutes to read your Constitution. And the average person, meanwhile, is spending 2.5 hours on social media. So take 1/5 out of that social media time to read your Constitution today.
And if you factor in the modern first-year freshman in college, it takes them significantly longer to read 750 words, about an hour and a half, in my experience. It's pretty crazy. I actually had a student, by the way, speaking of the Patriot Club, who, when the word patriot came up in a sentence she was reading, read it as Pat Riot. So I want you to join the Pat Riot Club, and get your mug today. The Pat Riot Club, my friends.